MAGA is communism? Recently, a well-known communist by the name of JU made a rather eye-catching statement in a series of tweets. The reality is far more profound. MAGA is communism. Firstly, let's get the correct context. It was in response to an exchange based on a tweet by user BlackRedGuard1 who said, "There needs to be hard repercussions for homotransphobia, just as there needs to be hard repercussions for any other manifestation of fascist thought or belief. No excuse, no discussion, channel the spirit of Stonewall." To which J.O. replied, "Even in the 1930s, when black people were being lynched, in its work amongst the southern white workers, the CPUSA and comrades like Harry Haywood never treated their racist views as fascist thought. They tried to educate our class, not condemn them. This tweet is simply disgusting." So, we can see that he is challenging the current leftist orthodoxy that parts of the working class are somehow our enemy, and even more boldly, themselves fascist. So what did he mean by MAGA is communism? J.O. elaborates. Communism is not an ideology or an ideal. It is the consciousness of the proletarians, the majority of all members of society, of the necessity for a fundamental revolution. Here I would have to agree. In a recent post on my own blog, I tried to be a bit more cheeky about the nature of what this consciousness looks like. Proletarian consciousness is tied directly to capital's unconsciousness, to bourgeois unconsciousness. The bourgeoisie cannot exist without constantly revolutionizing the instruments of production and thereby the relations of production, and with them the whole relations of society, the Communist Manifesto. The working class are not extrinsic to capital, but intrinsic, and their actions are determined, not determining. Communism is that which does away with existing society. It is a movement embedded within capital that can be emulated by the proletariat. If capital only unconsciously prepares the conditions for a higher mode of production, then the proletariat can only consciously carry this out. J.U. goes on to say, "Everything about MAGA is communistic. It appears regressive and backward to you because you are thoroughly indoctrinated in the political economy, food stamp socialism, and nanny government. You have lost the capacity to think for yourselves." I was at first hesitant about this claim about indoctrination, because anyone could say this of any group. We and our thoughts are all products of the dominant social and material forces we've been socialized under. Marx and Engels said as much in the German ideology. The ideas of the ruling class are in every epoch the ruling ideas, i.e., the class which is the ruling material force of society is at the same time its ruling intellectual force. The class which has the means of material production at its disposal has control at the same time over the means of mental production, so that thereby, generally speaking, the ideas of those who lack the means of mental production are subject to it. However, upon further thought, MAGA has, for better or worse, produced its own quasi-alternative reality, via media, via who they trust as experts, via phrases such as alternative facts, and while one could argue this is just an alternative way to be brainwashed, you could also argue it's given them some breathing room from the main perpetrator of the political economy of food stamp socialism and nanny government, that is, the mainstream media which reflects continuity of the fascist state in its justification for existing in the first place. Now, is everything about MAGA communistic? In a blog I wrote a while back called How to Sell Hours of Labor Reduction to MAGA, I made a similar claim, but I narrowed it down to what they've actually advocated for. MAGA actively wants to dismantle the public education system. MAGA wants to cut entitlement programs. MAGA wants to balance the federal budget. MAGA wants to end the Federal Reserve. MAGA wants to reduce the amount of federal employees. MAGA wants to defund the FBI and the intelligence agencies. This, I feel, is close enough to the aims of communism, but we still have yet to define why this is. Briefly, the fascist state in its management of the entire economy is the single largest embodiment of superfluous labor time on the entire planet. What does this mean? It means, among other things, it consumes the product of superfluous labor, superfluous capital, and it uses it to employ even more superfluous labor when it expands the public sector, namely the Department of Defense and its various contractors. It is the single largest employer in the country, and yet it produces precisely nothing. So when JU says, can the MAGA movement be critiqued? Yes, but so can the AFL-CIO, which has betrayed labor at every turn in the past 60 years, and the CPUSA, which is a revisionist cesspool. Critique away, but realize you are critiquing a proletarian movement, not the fascist state. It is only meant to drive home the point that to call MAGA fascist, which is how this discussion started in the first place, is to believe that the proletariat are somehow responsible for the barbarous political economy that the sum total of state actions and forces have wielded in their responses to the crisis of capital, which have resulted in the disastrous outcomes we've seen today: mass deindustrialization, mass inequality, and the high cost of living, i.e. inflation. If MAGA is fascist because of their views on homosexuality or trans people, fascism doesn't have any real meaning outside of right wing. But if that's true, then all leftist organizations are upholding the other half of the fascist sky, so to speak, with their calls to expand the welfare state, jobs programs, and indefinite spending a la modern monetary theory. The big takeaway is, surprise, MAGA is just as valid as a proletarian movement as whatever crappy leftist one you're currently a part of. It is not a question, however, of who is more working class or who espouses the more theoretically accurate positions. It is a matter of who recognizes that the only entity that can be fascist and wield fascism is the state. Thus far, MAGA, whether you find it ironic or not, has the closer approximation of this recognition, and therefore of the communist movement itself.